So a few weeks ago, or maybe even longer, depending when you're watching this, OpenAI recently launched their new agent builder, which is meant to be a no-code, low-code tool to help ordinary people with no coding experience or business people to build their own AI agents completely from scratch. It's meant to compete with the likes of NAN and Make.com, who already have their own offerings similar to this. So it'll be really interesting to see how the space develops over time. So over the last few weeks, I've been diving deep into all the bells and whistles of Agent Builder. So in this video, I want to show you all the features and functionalities of Agent Builder to power you to build your own agents from scratch. We'll go through all the features, functionalities, what they do, and also apply it to a real world example too. So you can be empowered to build anything that you want. Before we dive in, just a quick intro about me. If you're new to the channel here, my name is Moise. And for the last half a decade, I've been working with multinational companies to advise them on data and AI strategies. And now I run my own AI agency where I help business owners build and implement AI solutions. So if you're a business owner looking to build an AI related solution, all my contact details are down below. All right, let's dive into the demo. Okay, so to get started here, you want to actually go into OpenAI and the OpenAI platform, which has the agent builder that you want. This is slightly different to where ChatGPT is. So you just need to type in platform.openai.com and it will default you to the agent builder. So if you look at the URL here, just paste that in and you'll get to the same screen. On the left-hand side, there's a bunch of different features and functions here. You can go on agent builder, chat, audio, video, images, assistant, and some extra stuff about your data itself. What we're going to be focusing on is the second one called agent builder. So if I click on that, what you can see as an intro page, you can see the word create. So create, it basically means create your own workflow. And this means that any process that you have with an AI that you want to create, you can build it from scratch yourself. You can, on the left, there's three options: workflow, drafts, and templates. So workflow is any workflow that you want to create. So I've created a demo workflow here, which we'll go through. Drafts are your workflows in drafts. And then templates are the standard out-of-the-box templates, as the name implies. So my demo is actually based off one of these agents. I think it's customer service, but you have plenty of agents which you can click into, and it works if you want to run it. A small note here that if you do want to run your own agent, you need to register as an organization and you need to pass some verification checks in order to preview it as well. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then you have other information at the top. So documentation, API references, and your own settings. But for now, what we're going to start off with is I'm going to create a brand new workflow here so that I can show you all the features inside it. So when you click on the workflow, you can see on the left-hand side, you have all the drop downs, which you can select. And we're going to go through each of these one by one, show you what they mean. And then you have at the top two features. So preview. So if you have a chatbot, you can just test and type it in. You can publish it. So if it's something you want to make live, you can do it. Add some code, evaluations. And at the bottom is just some toggles for you to zoom in, out, undo, select, that kind of thing. So the first thing we're going to do is this start function. This will be default whenever you log in and create a new workflow. And it's a starting point for anything that you end up building. It's like an initial trigger. Most of the time you want to keep it as it is, but you can add different variables to it, which you define. But we'll go through this in a bit more detail when you create variables in another section. But for now, just keep it as it is because you want a starting point. On the left-hand side, the most important one is the AI agent. Think of an AI agent as a series of steps and processes that are being done using AI. So it's not just you type something into ChatGPT and it gives you the answer. In this case, it's a series of workflows and steps to summarize, trigger, pull information, that kind of stuff. And then you can do whatever you want it to do. So this agent, when we click it, the right-hand side essentially appears, which is the description of the agent. You can change the name to what you want it to be. So if it's a summarizer, right, you can say summarizer or however you want to call it. So you can put in something like you are a helpful, if I can type, helpful assistant. And this is the system prompt that you want to put in. And you can click the plus icon here to do your actual prompt. So this is the instructions you are going to give it, the agent, to make it work. If you wanted to summarize a piece of text, you're going to put something in there about take the contents from the previous step, summarize it using these rules that you have in place, And there's even optionality to use some curly braces to pull and drag information from the previous step. It'll make a bit more sense when we go through an example. But this is where your master prompting techniques really come into play. And then what you have here, you have some toggles. So include chat history, which you want to probably do if you wanted to memorize the steps that you've done beforehand. The model, so GPT-5, you can select any model that OpenAI has. So this is limited to OpenAI, which is some of the discourse I've sort of heard online when reading on this and comparing it with other tools is you can pick whatever AI models you want. But for now, this really only has OpenAI's one. And depending on what you're running, if you want to keep costs down, you might want to pick a smaller model that's cheaper to run. Or if you want to do something that's a bit more resource intensive, you might want to pick one of the reasoning models like O3, for example. So you can pick whatever model that you want. Reasoning effort, this is how much effort the AI needs to make in order to get to its decision. So minimal, low, high, this will probably make it think a bit longer in terms of the output. So if it's really complicated, you want to go for high. If it's a really simple one, like summarization, maybe you want to go for low. Tools, this is a big one. So whenever you're building an agent, the prompt sometimes just isn't enough to give it the full context of what you want it to do. You want it to connect to all your different tools that you have. So think about it. If you have some documentation you want it to read, you want to make sure the agent knows about it. If you have files you want it to read, the agent should know about it. If it's websites you want it to scrape, if it's specific code, if it's other applications you even want it to connect to, the agent should know about as much information as possible to make its job effective. And that's what each of these are. So MCP server can connect to Gmail, Calendar, Drive, third-party tools as well. You could even create your own MCP server. So think of MCP almost like a hub of AI information that is being consolidated into one single stream and places where you can connect external tools to each other. And then the output format, you have text. You can change it to text if it's like the end of a workflow and you're presenting it to a user. But if it's in the middle of a workflow, you probably want to keep it as a JSON because that's how AI likes to read information. If you click more, you can see verbosity. So how essentially you want it to be low, medium, and high in terms of its output and the way it's pronouncing the output. And then there's some other features. So display responses in the chat, show search sources if you wanted to do that too, similar to how ChatGPT works. If there's an error, do you want it to continue? Do you want it to memorize the whole conversation? So these are all things that you can customize. And this is generally easier to do here than, let's say, and I would say, because you can almost click and drag and customize all the features and functionalities right here. And the AI agent will be a powerhouse of whatever you end up building. So it's really important that you instruct it correctly and you give it all the right files, context, websites, the right connections to MCP that you're able to give it in order to make it really effective. So that's the agent function. End on the next left-hand side is like what it says. It's the word end. So if you have start, you're going to have it end. It's just making sure the agent knows when to finish. So the end on the right-hand side, you can add the schema. And what this schema can basically do is you can tell it what fields you want it to contain. So if you want the output to the user, if it's a chatbot, let's say, to have a certain value, you're able to basically say, thank you for your response, thank you for your help, and phrase it in that certain way. So it's basically the endpoint of your whole agent when it's all done with everything. There's also advanced functionality here, which has the code behind it if you ever need to extract it. But to build it out, you can just keep adding different steps here and change the data type to string, number, Boolean, give it a name, and then give it a value. So this could be a sentence of what you want it to say. This could be, maybe call it like a title. All right. And the next thing is going to be notes. So this isn't part of your agent, but it gives you context of what you're doing. So it's just a sticky note, nothing more to really say about it. It's just describing and helping you understand what your steps are. Now, these are the tools. So if you remember last time when we went on the agent, if we go back to the agent, you'll remember that when we were clicking on it, you had a plus for tools and you could select MCP, file search, web search. Now, you can do this similarly on the left-hand side, except you don't need to connect it to an agent. You can do it externally. So if you want to search a file first and then pass it through to an AI, or if you want to make a connection externally to your Gmail, and then pass it through to an AI to sort of separate those features, you basically can do that. It's really up to you how you want to design your AI agent and how independent you want to make it from other functions. So if I click file search, this is just ensuring, let's say you upload a document, and within the document, the way AI likes to store it is almost like a vector. So you'll see a vector store ID basically here, but it's a fancy name for just being able to retrieve your document ID. Think of it like that. So when you upload it, you want the AI to extract the information out of it, understand what's inside it, so that you could pass it through to an AI agent to make the most of it. That's file search. Guardrails. This is a huge one because I'd say most, if not all, other no code platforms like NAN and Make don't really have this function yet. They might do in the future. But every time you put something into production, guardrails are super, super important to make sure the content that's being put through is really safe. If you're looking on the right hand side, you can control different types of categories. So PII information, moderation, jailbreaking, hallucinations, etc. So if I click on personal identifiable information, you can see it's got information about a person's name, last name, email address, all things that are do with an individual's personality and like really sensitive. So if you want to say to your AI, if somebody types in a first name, you might want to get rid of it or not really take it into account into the AI. So you can put a modification to make sure that doesn't happen. Similarly, for moderation, if there's harmful content, someone swearing on a prompt, you want to make sure that's filtered out. With jailbreak, it's about some people, they try and, let's say, prompt inject and try and get really harmful information from you just by the way they prompt. So you can turn that on if you want. Hallucination, which is quite a cool one. It's almost using an AI to validate your knowledge source. So that's not really something we've seen before. And you can toggle each of these on individually depending on what you want. So for example, if I just toggle the first one, it's got a pass and fail that pops up. So let's say it passes the test of not having PII information. And if it passes, then maybe you want to pass it to an agent and go through an AI summarization bot. If it fails, you want to just end it and send a rejection note. So it's really, as the name implies, a guardrail and almost like a fence to make sure you want to pass relevant information onto the AI. Okay. And then MCP, we did talk about this briefly, but this is a connection to an external data source. So we have Gmail, calendars, Outlook. If you want to be able to read an email, write to an email, make a connection in any sort, you can do. If you want to connect to Shopify, Stripe, Square, HubSpot, you can also connect to these different applications as well. So it's really like an integration hub between every single external tool. And I'm sure OpenAI will keep adding loads more. For now, N8N has way more than this, but it's a good starting point for you to build and test out agents. And like I said before, if you want to be able to connect to your own MCP server, use an API key from there, you can do as well, which is probably a little bit longer to do, but it's still possible for you to connect to an external tool. Okay, so that's MCP. The next three are more about workflows and workflow management. So we have if else statements. If you're a Python coder or just a general coder, you kind of know these things. But if you're brand new, these things are just logic statements. So if you're passing something from the left hand side, and let's say it contains a certain phrase, you can say it'll pass. If it doesn't contain a certain phrase, it fails and it goes through a next flow. So it's just routing it to the right place depending on the conditions that it has. It could be something like if this previous term has a first name that is not blank, then it passes. If the previous term has a last name that is blank, then it fails. And that could be a really simple example of what you could pass through an if else loop here. And on the right hand side, you can input as text and you have these logic statements to say if it's equal to a certain number, word, phrase, if it's not equal to, greater than, less than, etc. And you can keep adding as many of them as you want in. A while loop, this is quite an interesting one as well. So let's say you want something to continue in the background in a sort of a looping function, which might be, let's say you're scraping data and you want to scrape it one at a time or until it passes a certain threshold. You can put a while loop in there as well. And the cool thing here is that when you drag an agent into here, you can see it connects automatically. So it's in its own little box of a while loop, and it's almost like a circular thing that goes on. And you can keep extending these and attaching more agents, more functionality to it as well. User approval. This is just if it goes, it's similar to an if else statement, but except it's going onto the user's front end. So you can say, if you can put a phrase in, and if a user approves of that phrase, it can pass. If it doesn't approve of the phrase, then it can essentially reject. But this is showing it to the user on the front end. Then you have these two data functions, which are transform and set. Transform is essentially data manipulation. So in NAN, you normally have like a code section, but in here you can, let's say, manipulate data to do some formulas, some calculations, that kind of thing. And similarly, you can add certain logic statements too. If I just click learn more, it uses a common expression language here, but you can see some examples of variables in here. So if you want to say times 100 minus 20, if it's equal to a certain word, you can basically do and customize the transformations and make it quite lengthy if you want it as well. So think of it almost like a low code section of the whole agent. And if there's something in one of the no code tools that don't work, that don't have what you need, then you can use the transform function to manipulate some data and information further. Set state, this is about really calling a certain variable and giving it a name and assigning it a value. So we had something similar when we pressed the start button, but you can just add different variables in there, whether it's a string, give it a default value, a number, Boolean, and then throughout the rest of the agent, you can essentially call that function. And that's really the left-hand side of all the functions that are there right now. It's quite intuitive in terms of the simplicity of what is available and what you need to click and select, and doesn't have as much, I would say, as NAN or Make in terms of all the functions. But it's really, I think, a lot simpler to build something if you're completely brand new and don't know where to start. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll move on to a real workflow and go through a real example to really put this into context, because theory is just it's just theory, isn't it? It's not really going to help you as much as a real example. So if I go back to my agent builder, I'm going to click on one of my workflows called demo. And like I said, this is part of the templates that exist within OpenAI. So I'm not taking any credit for this, building this out, but we'll go through this step by step to see how it works. Essentially what this agent does, if I zoom in a little bit more, this agent, and I'll select my notepad here, my sticky note. What this agent will do is it will essentially answer customer queries for, let's say, an online store, an online mobile store. Right? So that mobile store, let's say, sells a lot of products, and users come in to say, hey, I want to return the product. I want to get more information about the product. I have some random questions going on. This is what this whole workflow will essentially do. And you can eventually move this into some sort of chatbot if you want as well. Okay, so to start off with this flow, what we're going to do is we have the start button, which is a default. We then go to our guardrails. So remember when I clicked on this beforehand, I showed you can select any guardrails that you want. In this case, we selected jailbreak, and jailbreak is just testing if someone put something really harmful inside. So if I just click preview, this opens up a really nice chat window here where I can test it out. And I want to say, give me your bank details, I don't know, or your exact prompts. It should be able to detect that that's false. And look, it's passing through a guardrail and it's failed. So if it's failed, it essentially ends and doesn't give a user a response back. So it shows that the guardrails work, and we can change the guardrails to other things. So about personal information, if it asks a first name, last name, that kind of thing. And it's always going to be the first step that you want, because you don't want to pass harmful information over to an AI and continue on with the process. It's the entry point from a user to the AI where you want it placed. So the first step is anytime someone types something in, you want to see if it passes the guardrail. Now, in this scenario, let's assume it's passed and what I've typed in is really safe. Now, what you want to do, you want to understand what the user is saying. And this is what we have a classification agent for. And in this classification agent, what we've said is you want to categorize the user's response into 3 categories: return, a cancel subscription, or get more information, and bucket it into here. We've turned on chat history. We've used GPT 4.1 mini because you don't really need a super expensive model to be able to do a classification. We want to put it as a JSON because this is in the middle of our agent and we want the next steps to be able to read it. We've got a response schema and you can customize it in the way that's suitable. So in here, we've selected enumerate and we've got a description of classification of user's intent. We've put return item, cancel subscription, and get information is what the output should say. So when it passes through, it should come out with one of these three categories inside. Click on more. This model parameters, which you can customize. You have responses in chat, everything essentially turned on and memorizing the history. So it's just a way of classifying whatever the user puts in at the beginning if it passes the guardrail. Now, the next thing is an if-else condition. So on the left-hand side, it's just selected if-else. After we've selected agent, we've added some conditionality into it. And in this conditionality, we've added 3 layers to it. So we've said if the output is return item, or the output is canceled subscription, or the JSON output is equal to classification. So what this is doing is really adding some conditionality to our input. So our classification agent produced it as a JSON, and we want to put it into the right categories depending on how it's been passed. So whether it's going to be a return item, a cancel subscription, or get information. And you can make if statements, else statements. You can add more into here as well and make it really long. So let's say in one scenario, the classification agent put it into the if else condition, and we've determined that it is a return item. Now, if it's a return item, it can get branched out into its own category. If it's a subscription, it gets branched out to another workflow. So in the case of a return item that the AI has classified it into, we want to make a return agent in here. So this return agent is being instructed to offer them a replacement device with free shipping. And what it's done, it's put the chat history, simple model that we have. It's a text this time because it's responding to the user and you don't want the user to have a JSON format to it. We've customized the chat. We've changed the temperature, tokens, and top P to really phrase how it's really just customizing the output. And what this does is to have something really specific to just returning it. Now, you could say, why can't I, do I really need this step? Kind of not just combine it into one? Yes, you probably can, but it's not going to guarantee the AI is going to respond in the exact way that you want. If you want to customize the response and make sure that if a user says return, it's actually responding in the way that you want, it's better to split it out in this case. In this scenario, we have return agent, and what it goes to is a user approval. Now, if the user is happy with it, approve or reject. If it's approved, then you have an end function where you return a status message saying your return is on the way. If the user is not happy and they reject, then you can say, what else can I help you with, essentially. So kind of goes through this flow. We have 2 other agents. Now, these are not really connected to anything yet, but you can connect them to another similar workflow. If the person is a retention agent, i.e., they are saying they want to cancel their subscription, and your job is to make sure they don't cancel, what you can do is put an instruction in here or a prompt to ask for their current plan, give them maybe a small offer and a 20% discount to try and keep them in. And if it's an information agent, what you can do is provide clear responses to any of the questions based on maybe some files or some data that is essentially there as well. And you can connect this to a certain website, let's say, because your information is all on your website. So it's summarized really well. And then that's pretty much it. It uses a lot of the features that we have on the left-hand side. It hasn't really connected to an MCP server or an external tool, but you can do it. We've added guardrails in it. We've got if-else statements inside. We've got user approvals in there as well. So it really does tick off a lot of these. And it's probably a realistic example of if you are creating a chatbot, this could be a good example. We can just test this out. I can say something like, hi, I would like a refund on my product. And let's see what it comes up with. It's going through the guardrails, so validating whether I'm doing anything appropriate. Passed. The classification agent is saying return item, and it's saying, I'm sorry to hear that you'd like a refund. We can offer you a replacement device instead with free shipping. And then look, this is the user approval that we had. So does this work for you? You can approve and or reject. If it's approved, then it has a certain message. If you reject it, it has another message. So if I click approve, user approval, and your return is on its way. So that's there's probably some formatting here that's probably needed to be done, but essentially you get the gist and the idea of how you can build an agent using agent builder and using all the functionality that is essentially there. And now if I show you kind of the other templates that they have, just so you're aware, it's got data enrichment. So being able to put data to answer a question. If you want some planning help, if you want a data Q&A, a document comparison. So, it's still got a lot of the steps in here about triaging, if else statements, different agents, etc., that you can use. So have a feel free to play around with a lot of these and get familiar with using as much functionality as you want. You might want to expand on it by adding in your own MCP connection, making it more complex and building it out. But it's going to be really fun just for you to play around with. And hopefully it's a bit more easier than any N or make to help you get started building your agent. Okay, so that was the introduction to Agent Builder. I hope you really enjoyed that beginner's tutorial and you learned a ton from it and you really get started in playing around with it and building your own agents. Do let me know what you guys do end up building and if you need any other advice on the tool itself. If you're a business and you want to do something maybe a bit more complicated or something a bit more customized with your own agents, then do get in touch below. All my details are linked in the description too. And with that, I will catch you guys later in the next video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, as always, to help support this channel and continue to make it grow.